company member for the next 10 years. During his tenure, Asian American Rep brought to life numerous overlooked plays by Asian American playwrights in over 35 full-stage productions, countless stage readings, and helped inaugurate San Diego's first Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month Festival. In 2013, Andy joined the largest and longest-running producer of Asian American theater, East West Players, and he is their production manager and casting director. On Andy's left is Elise Kim Prosser. She is currently on faculty with, along with me at the Rady School of Management at UCSD. She served as a dramaturgical consultant on tonight's production of AUBERGINE, and she was the board chair of San Diego's Asian American Repertory Theater, coordinated their residency at La Jolla Playhouse, and co-starred in their production of Julia Cho's BFE. Welcome, Elise. Next to me is Thelma Virata de Castro. She is a Filipino-American playwright whose work explores a variety of subjects, such as underserved communities, including immigrants and incarcerated individuals. She's former literary manager of San Diego Asian American Repertory Theater. She is also the founder of San Diego Playwrights, an all-volunteer network working to get local playwrights produced in San Diego. And she's currently doing work on a Creative Catalyst grant and working with Asian Story Theater here in San Diego. Welcome. I'm excited and honored to ask some questions about the topic of Asian theater rising. So that's my first question, is seeing your histories with Asian theater in San Diego and in America, how do you feel Asian theater is currently rising? Andy, you want to start?
Well, I think the... Am I on? Oh. Right. I mean, to me, it's more so that there are playwrights that are actually finding space in kind of mainstream spaces. Right. I mean, that's the thing. There are like 4 generations of playwrights that have been working, have been doing the work. It's just really gratifying that now, like 60, 50 years after kind of East West Players was the first Asian American theater in the nation, was founded in 1965, that the mainstream theaters are discovering playwrights like Qui Win and Julia and who else? Lauren Yee, Leona Kana-Winkler. That these playwrights are kind of cutting into kind of the mainstream, and that's kind of the really exciting thing.
Elise, how do you observe the Asian American theater in America right now?
Well, first of all, I feel really grateful to you and San Diego Rep for staging this play. It's about a Korean American family, and when I was a young girl, I never dreamed that there would be a play in a mainstream theater about a Korean American family. And the thing I love about Julia Cho's writing in particular is, even though it's about a Korean American family, the story is universal. We all have experiences of wanting to please our parents. We all have fond memories of the food that we ate when we were growing up. And she also includes a diverse character list. So it's not only about Korean Americans, but she sets Korean American families in with the real world. I mean, look at this audience today, right? We're representing all different backgrounds, cultures, races, religions, etc. And so I think that the future of Asian American theater is related to all theater. It's having everyone understand everyone else's point of view instead of saying, oh, this is unique and that's only for them. So I look forward to a very cohesive Asian American theater rising.
Elise, tell us something about your history with the playwright Julia Cho.
Oh, okay. The reason Julia Cho is one of my favorite playwrights is I have studied all of her plays, and I was also very fortunate to be an actress in one of her plays called BFE. Now, those of you might know what BFE is. Some of you might not. So I'm going to say that It stands for BUM, F word, Egypt. And this is a slang for being in the middle of nowhere, not knowing where you are. Now, the playwright, her name is Julia Cho, she actually went from LA. Her father was transferred to Arizona. And she went to Arizona and she felt like, I'm the only Asian person here. And so she wrote this play about feeling isolated, feeling like you're an outsider. The reason I say I was privileged to play this actress is this woman, she is a Korean American in the middle of BFE, and she is also agoraphobic. She's afraid to go out into the world. And don't we all feel like that sometimes? Life gets so stressful that you're afraid, you feel other, you feel isolated. And in that play, just like tonight's play, she involves a whole list of characters from the real world of all diverse ethnicities, cultures, backgrounds, genders, etc. And I think that's the thing that I really admire about Julia Cho, and that's why I feel a personal relationship with her.
Thelma, how is your own work a reflection of Asian theater rising? And tell us about your work.
Let me think about that. Wow. Asian theater rising. It's so ironic because I've been around a while. It's great to have that term and to have, like Andy mentioned, a lot more Asian American playwrights being produced in more theaters. However, there are Asian American playwrights and artists who have been working in the theater for decades. And I have a book that I brought with me. It's called Barangay to Broadway, Filipino American Theater History by Walter Ang. That's A-N-G. And it's great because he wrote the book that he was looking for. And I'm amazed, leafing through this book, I'm learning about theater companies that people have started that I had never heard of. And that's how theater companies happen. Like, I know the San Diego Rep started with a few individuals, and it built, and it became this institution. Andy founded the Asian American Rep with other colleagues, and it went on to many achievements. So there are all these different groups that have been working all over the country, some with different slants. For example, there's Rohana Mirza, who is part Filipino, part South Indian. And so she started a company called Desipina to look at the Asian theater from those two different perspectives. So I have been very rooted in San Diego, writing Filipino-American plays, and I've just been fortunate to have been supported by people like Andy and Asian American Rep, where I found a place to get my work produced. And I'm working with Asian Story Theater currently, and we take stories from the community. And sometimes we fictionalize them, although they're based on real people, and sometimes it's more of a documentary style. So I'm very community oriented, and it's exciting to be part of San Diego and to have a base for our stories to be presented.
Thank you. Andy, there's a lot of talk in San Diego's community right now, in the theater community, about inclusivity and diversity, and talk about what the challenges are for artists of different ethnicities in the San Diego theater and in the larger theater. Do you feel in your own work that you've faced challenges that are specific to challenges that someone from an Asian background would face in the theater?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, really, there wouldn't have been an Asian American Repertory Theater if I hadn't, right? If there were opportunities for us to work in this town, there would have been no need to build the company. You know, we had a lot of actors that had a lot of training behind them, a lot of experience, but they weren't getting roles, right? I mean, it's a question of, you know, right now, and ultimately, this is the reason why I ended up leaving San Diego, sadly, just because there wasn't a place. You know, I basically felt like I had hit a wall in this community in terms of what I could do without having to self-produce and put myself into deep amounts of debt in order to produce shows and let myself direct. But but that said, even just working at East West Players now, which is the longest running theater of color in the nation, the largest professional producer of Asian American theater in the nation, we're doing auditions for our production of Mamma Mia right now, right? And this is the thing, it's the thing where when I'm crafting this casting announcement and I'm asking for actors to play Asian Pacific Islander or person of color in these roles, this is the first time that a lot of Asian American actors would even get the opportunity to audition for this role. And it is a thing where, I have this analogy I always kind of like pointing out, is that if you take out just the resumes, just 3 resumes out of musical theater performers, 24-year-old female right out of conservatory or MFA program, right? The Caucasian actress probably have maybe about 40 credits, ranging from chorus roles to a couple of leads in community theater, ranging from Brigadoon to 42nd Street to Les Mis to whatnot. You'll go for the African American resume. It'll be about 20 roles, and it will be Smoking Joe's Cafe, Smoking Joe's Cafe, Smoking Joe's Cafe, Lion King, Jelly's Life, and then you'll get to the Asian American, and it'll be about 10, and it'll be Miss Saigon, 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 South Pacific, Miss Saigon, Miss Saigon. And when you just look at that, right, just by virtue of looking at the resume, and you go, if you put this into a large casting office, who's going to get the audition, regardless of what it is, right? Just that resume, and these are 3 actresses who have the same training, but just by virtue of what they have the opportunity to audition for, that is just limiting, right? The opportunity is not there. So for us, to do a show like Mamma Mia, which is honestly the widest show you could possibly do for an Asian American theater, and it's a show that Asian Americans would never get to audition for these roles, and that's like kind of the important thing. So.
That's really well stated. I have to say, I had some interesting discussions with Kim Heil, our casting director, in casting this production of Aubergine. I've been casting a long time, as you have, and what I do in casting is very quickly you look over a resume and you're looking at what roles were played at what theaters. And after a while, at San Diego Rep, you're basically seeing large actors who've done large leading roles at major theaters. As we're looking for the leads of this play, I'm looking for that, and Kim Heil said, that's not what you should be looking for, because the opportunities for Asian actors to play leading roles at major regional theaters in America is quite limited and challenging. You have to look for different things on the resume in terms of who the best actors would be.
Well, and to a certain degree, this is true for playwrights as well, right? I mean, I'd say 10, 20 years ago, Julia Cho would not be considered for stages, above 99 seat, because a lot of her work was so challenging. It was like, for San Diego people who, like most of her work was very sledgehammer, right? And if you remember that aesthetic, right? So and this is the thing, like you look back at Asian American playwrights who have been able to break through, like David Henry Hwang, and David Henry Hwang is really good at a very specific style of Asian American theater, which is writing Asian American theater for a wide audience, right? And that's the thing that you're kind of seeing now with playwrights like, Julia Cho being able to, to get into mainstream stages, or Kui or Lauren, who are able to just kind of tell their story, right? It's like there's no need to add a Peking opera sequence or add, some level of exoticism that makes it Asian, right? And to do the Asian American play, not the Asian play, right?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that when Julia Cho wrote this play, she felt it would never get produced. In fact, she, after a very strong early start to her career, she had what would be called a writer's block for about 5 years. And one of the things that got her out of the writer's block in writing this play was just a feeling that, oh, this will never be done. Because in order to do the story she was writing, she felt that actors would need to be able to speak English and Korean perfectly, and she didn't know who those actors would be. But in fact, those are some of the casting challenges in doing this play. Yeah?
Walter Ong, who wrote this book, he is also a journalist for the Inquirer online, not the National Enquirer, it's different. And he published a story this week about the first Filipino-American actor on Broadway to play Hamilton. So Hamilton's a great example of being able to take risks and open minds to who can play what role. And I want to acknowledge some company members of a local Filipino-American theater group in town, Maarte Theater Collective. I have Claudette Santiago and Rihanna Casio. And how do we get to those leading roles on Broadway? Well, you work, you build your acting base. Actors have had opportunities at smaller theaters, they get more experience, and then they are able to progress in their careers.
Two of our actors in this company come from Minneapolis, where Theater Moo has been doing incredible work and training an entire group of actors who are outstanding because they're working so much, which is a big challenge. Elise, what do you feel are the challenges that an artist in the Asian American theater faces?
Well, I think we have to ask who has the right and obligation to tell a story. And the latest article that I read interviewing Julia Cho is she said, yes, you know, I'm Korean American, and yes, some of my plays are Korean American. Does that mean I have to write stories for the rest of my career on Korean Americans? No, I'm an artist first. So I can write any story that comes from my imagination. So, you know, there's an argument to be made on, you know, both sides. One of my favorite songs in Hamilton that you brought up is Who Tells Your Story? Right? So who is going to tell your stories? Does it have to be someone from whatever ethnic background you're on? Then that puts a limit on the imagination of playwrights. So in general, I'm in favor of imagination. I'm in favor of writing whatever your story is. And in fact, I'm taking a writing class right now where we are encouraged to tell our stories. That might be about being Korean American, it might be about all other sorts of things. And so I would encourage people to, you know, let their imaginations run wild. I don't think there should be constraints.
And I'd like to yes and that you know there's that it's also the gauntlet is thrown to directors of the American stage because it is so a little factoid we like kind of pointing out is that the last census pointed out that 2042 is the year in which our nation will flip to become a minority majority country. That is to say, 51% of the nation will either be people of color, mixed race, or female, or under the age of 30, right? And a massive majority of those people under the age of 30 are going to be mixed race. So it is a thing of, as we talk about being theater makers and theater administrators, and what that means and how we are programming and who are the audiences that we're trying to speak to. It's a question of, are we programming for the populace, right? If we are not telling the stories for who the populace is, which is 51% non-white, then who are we telling this, who are we creating, and who are we perpetuating these stories for?
Andy, I wonder if you could share with us a production that you've worked on that you feel has had the most influence on your career.
On my career? Well, on my career, I'd have to say in about 10-ish, 9-ish years ago, I did an adaptation of Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog, which was here in San Diego during the time of Comic-Con. I scared everybody because we got enough good press and we got featured in American Theater Magazine, and people thought we were the pre-Broadway workshop official through Joss Whedon. This is basically a web-based musical written by a famous television writer who created a 3-part web series musical starring Felicia Day, Nathan Fillion, and Neil Patrick Harris. And basically, I adapted that web series into a stage musical and did it here for the geek audience of Comic-Con. You know, that was very much a kind of an exercise in Well, one, doing a show kind of at scale because it was a bigger production, and what did come with a bigger brand name that I could actually work with a larger palette. So that was kind of exciting, and that was, also the opportunity to explore, the majority of my career is kind of, I'm known for being an Asian American theater artist. But if you ask me what I am culturally, I'm probably more geek American than I am Asian American. And when we're talking about culture, right? I mean, there's identity, and then there's culture. Culturally, I'm geek American. But so that was the thing of being able to express and explore, that part of myself in that piece.
Thelma, can you tell us about the work that you're doing right now under the Creative Catalyst Grant?
Yes, the play that I'm writing is The Fire in Me, and I say writing because as I've told several people, my 4th draft is due on Sunday, and I'm going to work on it again tonight. It's in partnership with Asian Story Theater and Access Inc. I have interviewed members of the community in the Filipino community and outside of the Filipino community about the subject of domestic violence. And I've learned that it's not this little specific story. It's only about Filipinos, it's only about immigrants, it's only about undocumented people, but it's a story for all of us. And I'm excited to have the support of the San Diego Foundation and also California Humanities to explore this story and share through my play what I've learned from these interviews.
Elise, you've told me that Julia Cho is your favorite writer. Why do you consider that?
Her language is like music to me. She's very concise. Every word, as dramaturg, I studied every word, every number. It's almost like poetry to me. She's very spare. And that appeals to my sense of imagination. Coming back to your former question, the more spare it is, the more the audience can remember their own experiences and project their own experience onto what they're seeing on stage. I just also think she's hilarious. There's just a lot of humor in every line.
Can you tell us about some of what you've discovered in the language? I know there was an interesting reference to the price of a knife in the play.
Okay, so you want me to tell the story now before the play?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So as part of my work as a dramaturgical consultant, I really almost memorized the play. And as a playwright myself, I know that every word matters. And there was something in the back of my mind as I was going over the history of Korea. I don't want to give a long lecture about it, but Korean pottery was found in 8,000 BCE. In about 2000 BCE, there was something called the Shilla dynasty of Korea. And a significant part of recent Korean history is the Japanese occupied or took over Korea, and that occurred in 1910. My own mother, who's 85, was part of this Japanese occupation. She was stripped of her name. She was given a Japanese name. Immediately, they were not allowed to speak any Korean in the household or in the schools. She had to actually wear armbands to identify her as Korean instead of Japanese. And Koreans were treated as second-class citizens. And so that's just something I want to share as part of Korean history. And then the Korean War was 1950 to 53. And I'm just ruminating over all of these numbers. At the end of the war, and then of course, there was a North Korea and a South Korea. So as I was ruminating over all these numbers, I actually came to this aha moment that you will see in the play, that Ray, the chef, is using these very expensive knives. And being just out of culinary school, he had to charge these knives on his father's credit card. So we can all imagine what that's like. Ray has a very thrifty father, and he's like, how dare you charge $1,910 for these knives? So that's a lot of money. So my first reading, I was like, of course he'd be pissed, that's a lot of money. But as I was doing this history research, I realized that Julia Cho, the brilliant playwright, chose that number for a reason. The $1,910 refers to the time when the Japanese took over Korea. And in fact, Ray is using these Japanese knives, and his father doesn't care about the $1,910 as much as he cares that these are Japanese knives, because in my imagination, father may have lived through this sort of Japanese occupation where he was treated as a second-class citizen, just like my own mom.
You didn't give away too much. That was nice. Andy, you made reference to a playwright that you said is writing Asian plays for an Anglo audience. I wonder if you could talk about how would you define Asian theater? I know people are always asking, like, Todd, talk about Jewish theater. And I'm like, how, you know, Aubergine is a Jewish play. It's about food, memory, culture. It starts with a pastrami sandwich. It's a Jewish play. What do you consider to be an Asian play?
Well, I mean, there's multiple layers here, right? You have Asian theater, which it goes back to like kabuki, no, Chinese opera, like the theater in Asia. You know, there's also a lot of contemporary theater movements in Asia. Then you have Asian American theater, which has kind of a the scholastic community kind of refers to it in a series of waves. So you have that first wave of Asian American playwrights, which includes like Frank Chin, Wakako Yamauchi, who just passed this past year, plays like And the Soul Shall Dance, Yankee Dog is Phil, Ken Katanda. So you have basically these different waves of playwrights and creations of theaters, right? So you have Frank Chin, kind of that first wave. You have like Phil Kangatanda and David Henry Wong are kind of that second wave. The third wave was kind of our generation in the 90s, like kind of that post Joy Luck Club boom. The last time Asian Americans became hip, and we thought we were going to take over then. And then this more recent wave, this fourth wave. So I would say there's kind of a different focus in each of these generations of playwrights, right? You have that kind of 1960s, very much rooted in civil rights movement, kind of very angry, very activist work of like Frank Chin, a lot of swearing, a lot of kind of backlashing against social constructions of how Asian people are defined. By the time you get to that second wave, and it's David Henry Wong, and it's Phil Kangatanda and Helena Hassel Houston, it's a lot of reconciliation between second generation and third generation Asian Americans, and kind of cultural conflicts between immigrant stories and contemporary stories. By the time you get to third, it starts getting into like the Sam I Ams from Garrett Almada and Diana Sun, where it's kind of exploring that fourth generation populations, where it's more the stressors of living past the Asian identity, right? And so you get to now where it's kind of, it is a little bit more fast and loose. It's very influenced by television and film, where you have very cinematic writing, and it is very meta now. I'd say a lot of these contemporary playwrights. You're also dealing with a lot more mixed race stories too, which is something which I love seeing kind of explored now, because it's something we haven't really tapped into a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for such a broad answer. Well, I have one more question that I want to ask, but before I do, I want to open the floor if anyone would like to ask any of our panelists a question.
Don't jump off at once.
Apparently you covered it all.
Well, I'll ask my one more question. So, as a theater, San Diego Repertory Theater is one of the words that we are going to use in the future as the 2 or 3 words to describe our theater is inclusive. And I think you'll be very happy because that takes the place of the middle word in our trio of exotic. I think we all felt that inclusive is saying something different than like, oh, that's an interesting tasting food, So we're happy about moving towards that change. How would you advise San Diego Repertory Theater to be a more inclusive theater? And Thelma, do you want to start? We'll go down the aisle.
Sure. I think being inclusive means listening. I think our country learned a lot when the youth of Parkland took the lead in the movement for gun control. And so it's really important to listen when people are angry. I've attended one of the EDI conversations, and I've heard about some of the others that have been happening in the San Diego theater community. And I think we all need to be comfortable with anger and to really listen why people feel they're excluded from the theater community. And the first step is to listen to that. And to take an even further step is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like Andy was saying, some playwrights are a little more palatable in the mainstream than others might be, because it's friendly, like we can laugh together, and just be open to ideas that make you feel uncomfortable, make you feel a little guilty, and then just sit with that feeling, like, why am I feeling funny about this? Why do I want to defend myself for voting for this person, or for having a best friend who's Korean, and doesn't that make everything okay? So I would just say, listen.
Thank you. Elise.
Well, I think what you're doing here at San Diego Rep is inclusive. So this play is an example of how you are fulfilling your mission statement. One of my New Year's resolutions, we are in January, is to learn more about other people, other cultures. And to Thelma's point, it really is about listening and learning. And then that makes this play for everyone and not just separate audiences. Do you remember when we were younger, we all watched the same shows on TV, and now there's so many channels that we only watch the shows maybe that represent, our families or what we know. And so TV, theater, music, all sorts of culture, visual arts, the more we learn about other people's way of seeing, the more we can learn and understand each other.
You guys all said good stuff. Makes my job harder. The only thing I think what I would add is, to add another Hamilton reference, but really thinking in terms of who is in that room where it happens, right? And because it is a thing where I think the Rep has a great legacy actually of including people from other communities in this process of selection and programming, and that's a big part of it, right? So it's continuing to expand who is invited into that room where it happens, and as that perspective, we kind of give this advice a lot. We work with a lot of the networks in terms of how can they better meet their target audiences and meet the profiles of their advertisers, and it is a lot about, well, who's in your writing group, right? If you're gonna do the Talkin, Chinatown or Yakuza episode, are you doing that well enough if you don't have a single Japanese American or Japanese American writer in your writers group, right? Can you really represent that? Can you really write to that experience? So so inviting those people into the room, inviting those people into the decision-making process, I think is the huge thing.
Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I want to thank our guests, Thelma, Virata de Castro, Elise Kim Prosser, and Andy Lowe. This is Talkin Theater with Todd, and enjoy the show tonight. Thank you very much.